2023, dwi'n meddwl. Un o'r 4 ohonyn ni ddoth gyflwyno penodi gan y Llywodraeth, a mae Karen yn gadael ac yn canolbwyntio ar llwyth gwaith sydd gen hi yn ei swydd o ddydd i ddydd sydd yn llwyth gwaith sylweddol. Felly, eisiau jyst deud diolch i Karen am ei chyfraniad sylweddol i'r bwrdd reit o'r dechrau'r bwrdd newydd yma ac dymiadau gorau ar gyfer y dyfodol, Karen. Diolch yn iawn. Ymlaen at yr eitem nesaf, os gwelwch yn dda, sef eitem 1.2, datganiadau o fuddiant. Unrhyw un efo unrhyw ddatganiad o fuddiant, os gwelwch yn dda. Nag oes? Iawn, ymlaen at eitem 1.3, y cofnodion y cyfarfod blaenorol. Ac wrth gwrs, cyfarfod, mae yna 2 gyfarfod wedi bod mis Mai a mis Mehefin. Un mis Mehefin, wrth gwrs, oedd adroddiad blynyddol a'r cyfrifon. Di pawb yn hapus i ni gymeradwyo y cofnodion yna, sgwch yn dda. Iawn, diolch yn iawn. Ac yna y camau gweithredu, eitem nesaf 1.4. Pawb yn hapus? Na i ddod at Gareth mewn munud, just checkio bod pawb yn hapus i dderbyn, ac yna mae yna sylwadau gan Rhian ac yna Gareth. Rhian gyntaf.
Dim ond sylw bach, dwi'n sylwi bod nifer o bethau yn cael ei ailfeirio at y pwyllgorau a just gofyn os modd i canlyniad neu beth bynnag ddod yn ôl at y bwrdd cyfan.
Diolch yn iawn. Fe nawn ni hynny drwy adroddiad cadeirydd pwyllgor, gobeithio bydd hynny yn cadw trac ar y materion yna. Gareth.
I just wanted to say on 2594 on the minutes, unfortunately PFIG wasn't able to consider the response to the MAG recommendations at its last meeting because of staff sickness, because we had made the point that we would invite everybody to you're all invited to the committee anyway, all the members of the board, but I just want to report that we hadn't done that, but we will be doing it at the next meeting, which is at the end of August.
Diolch yn iawn. Unrhyw un arall? Pawb yn hapus i dderbyn yr adroddiad yna? Diolch yn iawn. Ymlaen at yr eitem nesaf 1.5 sydd yn eitem rheolaidd i ni, wrth gwrs, eitem profiad, a tro hwn mae gennym ni eitem gan rywun sydd wedi bod yn derbyn gwasanaeth ac yn wir wedi bod yn gweithio yn y bwrdd iechyd, sef John. Felly dyn ni am glywed am stori John, a dwi am droi at Angela i gyflwyno'r eitem yma, os gwelwch yn dda. Angela.
Diolch. So as the chair's identified, this is a gentleman who is 100 years old, who is an ex-Royal Air Force veteran and has been cared for within our services. He's also a psychiatric mental health nurse by background, and he wanted to share his story about the care he had and for us to raise awareness of our POPI programme for veteran identification. So if I video. Thank you.
Well, originally I was called up in January 43, but I had my appendix out, followed by scarlet fever. So it was delayed, and I didn't actually join up in Cardington on the 8th of October 1943. I left Singapore in 47, arrived in Southampton in July, I think, 47. I was a FME, flight mechanic agent, not much of a mechanical. I was called up to Cardington just And then I moved up to Skegness, and I was billeted in the house up there. I went overseas and I arrived in Mumbai on the 1st of August, 45. I went to hospital to become a mental nurse. I was 3 years, 33 years, I think. Worked on the ward for more, till I retired. And then I went to a central clinic. Well, I just enjoyed the work, and working with colleagues. Yeah, I was a member of the RAF Association, and there was a branch that's in Denby. I was fortunate as well, I fell on the floor at home, and then I was transferred to hospital there. May have had a slight fracture of the left ankle. Doesn't bother me, but well, never thought of it really. Excellent, yeah. Well, very attentive and careful, professional. Lovely, yeah, everybody's very nice here, yeah. I think there's plans for me. I don't know if I will be transferred to the infirmary or that actually to my home.
Yeah, I think it was a real good opportunity to share the story of a health colleague and a veteran, and the care that he received as well. I've been on numerous occasions, and the atmosphere is very conducive to the enablement that happens. And at the last I heard after the story, he was doing well.
Yeah, good. Diolch yn iawn. Unrhyw cwestiwn, unrhyw sylw?
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Chris yn gyntaf fel
Chris,
campwr
as the
yn y maes
champion
yma,
in this
Chris?
area?
Thanks, Chair. I think just to take the opportunity as the board champion for veterans, just to draw attention to the very good work that's been done by Zoe Roberts et al. To further the interest both of veterans in the community, but those service members as well that live in the community and work for the health board. There's an awful lot, and the storyteller made reference to the Poppy process to be able to identify service users who have particular needs. And I think that the aim of this, as we want with everyone, is for them not to be disadvantaged by their particular circumstances. And we are signatories to the Armed Forces Covenant, and we do try as a health board to make sure that people are in the best possible position to ensure that they receive the health care that they need and the service they need, and no one else just by virtue of the role they've chosen or indeed what they did earlier on in their lives. So great to see this being brought to board and having a platform to show what Zoe and the rest of the team are doing. I know we had some quite involved celebrations a couple of weeks ago for Armed Forces Week, which was brilliant to see. I was certainly surprised at the number of service members that are involved in the health board. They lurk in every nook and cranny, so they really are all of us and a part of us. So great to see that we're doing that to help them.
Chris.
Anyone else with any questions or comments? If not, and we thank everyone who's prepared this item, and thank John, of course, for being so willing to talk. We wish him well. I'm sure we'll hear more. He has quite a story to tell. Very grateful for that. Everyone happy to accept the report with thanks.
Ymlaen at yr eitem
On to the next item.
Mae gennym ni adroddiadau gen i cadeirydd
Have some
wedyn
reports from me, then the chief exec and the vice chair.
Adroddiad gen i, mae'n adroddiad yn eich pecyn chi.
You have a copy of the report in the papers. I'd like to draw attention to a few things.
Oedden ni'n falch iawn o
I'm
allu
very pleased
croesawu Phyllis
to
aton
have
ni
been able to welcome Phyllis
fel aelod sydd
as a member
dod aton ni fel
who's
rhan o'r
coming to
rhaglen
us as part
ysgodraeth i ni
of the government's programme to add
ychwanegu cyfle i bobl gyfrannu
opportunities
at
for people
fyrddau.
to contribute
Felly, mae
towards.
Phyllis wedi bod i
Phyllis
cyfarfod
has
bwrdd
been
yn
to one
barod,
meeting
a mae yma
already,
heddiw, a
and
mae
she's
am
here
bod yn rhan o'n gweithgareddau ni
today,
yn
and she
ystod y
will be a
flwyddyn
part of our activities
sydd yn dod y flwyddyn nesaf.
in the year to
Felly,
come.
yn falch iawn bod Phyllis wedi
Very
ymroi
pleased
i'r
Phyllis
gwaith yn
has
barod.
committed to the work already.
Dwi wedi crybwyll yn yr
I've
adroddiad
mentioned in my report
materion ymwneud â'r Llywodraeth a'r
few
ysgrifennydd
things to do
cabinet
with the government and the cabinet minister
hyn dyn ni gyd yn ymwybodol
and outlining what we're all aware of,
weddys i ni
which is what
gyflawni
the
yn
government
ystod y flwyddyn
want
diwetha.
us
Mae'r
to
ysgrifennydd
achieve.
cabinet wedi
The cabinet
cyfeirio
secretary has
sawl
referred
gwaith, dwi'n
a
credu,
number of
at
times
i uchelgais, at i
to
ddymuniad o
the ambition
fel byrdde iechyd a'r
for
system
him,
iechyd y lles i gyflawni
by him to
bydd
achieve
bobl dyn ni'n
for the
gwasanaethu.
benefit of
Ac
the
mewn
people
llythyr
that we
ddiweddar,
provide a
mae wedi
service to.
crynhoi
And
pob
in a
dim. Dwi wedi
letter
rhoi y
recently,
ddolen yn yr adroddiad i
I've
bawb
given her
gael gweld beth ydy
a link
blaenoriaethau
in the
yr ysgrifennydd
report
cabinet
showing
a'r
the
Llywodraeth.
priorities of the secretary
Rwan, wrth i chi
and the government. And
ddarllen trwy'r
as you read
gohebiaeth yna,
through
benewch chi
the
sylwi,
correspondence, what
dwi'n
you
meddwl
will
bod
notice, I think,
ein blaenoriaethau ni
is
yn
that
cyd-fynd
our
gyda
priorities go hand in
blaenoriaethau
hand with the
y Llywodraeth a'r
priorities of the
ysgrifennydd
government
cabinet.
and the
Felly mae yna dir
secretary.
gyffredin. a
So
dyn
there
ni
is
wedi
common
ceisio
ground,
cwmpasu
and we have
y
tried to
blaenoriaethau yna
encompass
yn ein cynllunio ni, yn ein cynllun
this
blynyddol,
in
yn yr
our annual
cynllun
plan,
fwy
in
tymor hir
our
hefyd.
long-term
Un peth dwi
plans.
eisiau
And
tynnu
one thing
sylw
I'd like to
ato
draw
fo,
attention to
sef pwyslais
is the
yr ysgrifennydd cabinet
emphasis
a'r
of
Llywodraeth
the
ar gyflawni mwy
secretary on
yn y maes
achieving more
gofal sylfaen a
in
chymunedol.
primary and community
Felly,
care.
mae'n rhywbeth dyn ni wedi trafod
And I
gyda'n
think
dipyn fel bwrdd.
it's something that we
Rhai
have
aelodau
discussed quite a bit
wedi
as a
bod yn
board.
sôn am y
Many
cyfle
members
sydd
have
yna
talked about the
i ni
opportunities
wneud mwy yn y maes
to
cymunedol
do more
a gofal
in the community
sylfaen.
area.
Ac mae'r ysgrifennydd cabinet
And
gyda'r
the
un pwyslais.
minister, the secretary
Felly,
has
hawdd i ni
more of an
ddweud,
emphasis. It's
dim
easy
bach yn oddach i gyflawni,
to say,
ond
but it's more
mae rhaid i ni
difficult
symud
to
y cyfeiriad
achieve.
yna,
But
ac
we
mae
have
rhaid ni
to
wneud
move in
hynny
this
mewn ffordd
direction.
sy'n
We
mynd
have
i
to do so
wneud gwahaniaeth go
in a
iawn,
way
a
that
bod
will
dyn
make
ni'n
a real
gwybod
difference.
bod yr ateb
We
i
know
wella iechyd y
that
lles
the
yn gorwedd yn y
answers
gymuned,
lie in the
ddim mewn
community,
ysbyty o
not
reidrwydd.
in a
Felly,
hospital
dwi'n edrych
necessarily.
ymlaen
So I'm looking
at
forward
ymateb i'r her yna. Dyna beth ydi o,
to
dwi'n meddwl, i ni fel
respond
bwrdd, mae'n her
to the
i ni
challenge.
ymateb iddo fo
It
mewn
is a
ffordd
challenge
gadarnhaol
to
ac
respond
mewn
in a
ffordd
positive
bendant a
manner
chlir
and a
gyda
clear
deilliannau
way.
gallwn ni weld. Felly, o'n i'n meddwl oedd hynny'n ohebiaeth bwysig
I think this
gan yr
is
ysgrifennydd
important
cabinet.
by the
Yn byr
cabinet.
iawn, dau beth arall dwi eisiau tynnu
Very
sylw
briefly,
atyn nhw
I'd like to draw attention also
tu allan i
to what's
brif
been
ffrwd,
happening
os liciwch chi.
outside of the
Un y cyfle ges i
mainstream, as it
fynd i
were.
gyngerdd
I had an
gan
opportunity to go to a
bwr gymharol newydd y
concert
sefydlwyd
of a
yn
choir
ysbyty
that
Wrexham
has
Maelor
recently
yn
established
bennaf,
in Wrexham
ac oedd yn
Maelor.
wych i
It
weld
was great
y côr
to
yma
see
yn
this choir
perfformio ac yn
performing
gyfle i
and an
bobl sy'n gweithio
opportunity
yn y
for
gwasanaeth
people
iechyd
who
yn y
work in the health
Ddwyrain yn
service
gallu
in the
dod yn
North
gyd
East
yn wythnosol.
coming together on a weekly basis.
Ac o sgwrsio gyda'r aelodau, oedden
Having
ni'n
talked
sicr yn
to ministers,
clywed pa mor werthfawrogol oedden nhw o'r
But as
cyfle i wneud
staff,
hynny,
we saw
ac i
how
ddianc
glad
o
they were
brysurdeb
to be able to
a
escape
bwysau gwaith
from
i wneud rhywbeth mor wahanol,
everyday
gallu ymlacio,
work and to be able
a
to
gallu ymwneud ag
relax and to
eraill
be
mewn
able
ffordd
to get
sydd
involved
ddim
with
yn
others
trafod
in a
gwaith.
way that
Mae
doesn't
tuedd gen ni yn does, hyd yn
involve
oed pan
work.
dyn ni'n
There is a
cymdeithasu,
tendency,
dyn
even
ni'n
when we
trafod gwaith
socialise,
yn aml,
to discuss
ond
work.
mae cerddoriaeth yn bodd
With music
i ddianc o hynny,
is
os
a
gael
way
eto
of
wneud o, ac oedd
escaping
yn wych iawn.
that, if I may
A
say
dwi'm yn
so.
gwybod os dylen ni annog
I don't know if I should
chwarae
encourage
eraill
establishing
bwrdd
other
iechyd,
choirs in the health
neu
board,
weithgareddau sydd yn mynd i roi
and
cyfle i
activities
bobl
that give opportunities
ymlacio a
for people to
chymdeithasu.
relax and
A rhywbeth i
socialise.
ystyried, dwi'n meddwl. Dwi
Something
wedi clywed
to
rhyw
consider,
sôn
I
bod na
think.
rhai
I've heard
o gwmpas ysbyty
that
Gwynedd
there are
falle
some in
yn awyddus
Ysbyty
i
Gwynedd
wneud.
maybe who'd like
Ond
to
mae
do
angen
so,
gwthio'r cwch i'r dŵr.
but we need to drive that
Felly, os ydy rhywun
forward.
yn
So
awyddus,
if anybody
dwi'n
is
siŵr
keen,
byddwn ni'n barod i'w
I'm sure
cefnogi nhw.
we would be able to
Ac yn
support.
ola,
And finally,
wythnos dwytha, dwi'n credu,
last week, I think,
i seremoni
I
raddio
went to a
Project
graduation
Search, a
ceremony
dwi wedi
for the
cael y
Search
cyfle i
project.
mynychu seremoni
I've had the
yma
opportunity to
o'r
attend these
blaen,
ceremonies
ac wedi
previously
mwynhau yn
and have
arw.
enjoyed.
A rheswm dwi wedi mwynhau
The reason
ydy
I've enjoyed
oherwydd
them
pobl ifanc a gweld sut mae pobl
because
ifanc
I
wedi
meet young
datblygu, wedi
people
cael eu
who've
cefnogi,
developed, have been
pobl ifanc sydd
supported,
angen y
young
gefnogaeth
people who
ychwanegol
need
yna,
that additional support,
ond yn dangos
but
sut mae cydweithio wedi
demonstrating
digwydd.
how there's been
Oeddwn ni
collaboration.
yn yr wythgrig wythnos dwytha,
I was in
cydweithio
Malt last week.
Cyngor Bwr Iechyd,
There was
a
collaboration
Cyngor
between
Sir,
us
Cyngor
and the
Sir
local
Clud, wych
authority.
iawn. Ag pan oeddwn ni yn Coleg Menai,
And when I was in Coleg Menai,
rai wythnos yn ôl, oedd y cydweithio yna rhwngthon ni fel Bwr Iechyd
the
a
collaboration
Coleg
between
Menai
us,
Llandrillo,
and
ac mae
Coleg
yna
Menai
partneriaid eraill
Llandrillo.
hefyd.
And there are other
Mae rhaglen
partners as
arbennig
well.
o dda,
It's a
a
great
dwi isio
programme, and I'd
i ni
like
fel
to,
bwrdd ystyried
for
oes
us
modd
as a
i
board,
ni
to consider
gefnogi,
whether or not we can
y
support
prosiect
this
mewn
project
ffordd ymarferol
in a
fwy
practical way,
hyd-dymor.
more long term.
Dwi am osod y cwestiwn yna
I'll
i ni
ask
heddiw,
that
a dwi
question
eisiau gweld
today,
os oes modd
and
i
I'd
ni
like
ddilyn
to
hynny
see
fyny.
if we could follow that
Oherwydd yr
up.
hyn sy'n digwydd
Because
ydy mae
what's
pobl ifanc yn
happening
cael yr
is
hyfforddiant,
that
maen
young
nhw'n
people get the
graddio,
training, they graduate,
wedyn maen nhw'n chwilio
and
am waith
they're
neu
looking for
prentisiaeth
work or
neu
apprenticeships
rhywbeth
or something
dros dro yn aml.
temporarily,
A
quite
dwi'n
often.
yn grediniol
And I'm
bod na
convinced
rôl i ni fel
that
y
there is a
cyflogwr
role for
mwyaf
us
yma
as the
yn y
largest
gogledd
employer in the north
i gefnogi pobl
to be
ifanc i sicrhau bod
supporting
na
young
gyfle iddyn
people,
nhw. Os
to
nad
ensure
ydyn
there
ni'n
are
neud fel y prif
opportunities. Unless we
gyflogwr
do so as the
yma yn y
main
gogledd,
employer in the north,
dwi addasu am wneud.
who
Felly
else
dwi
will do
eisiau gosod
so?
y cwestiwn yna
So I'm
heddiw, dwi'm wedi
setting that
ysgol
question
ateb,
today. I don't
ond dwi eisiau
expect an
gosod y
answer.
cwestiwn bod na,
So I'm just
ma' na gyfle
asking,
i ni, dwi'n
there
meddwl,
is an
gefnogi
opportunity,
pobl
I
ifanc
think,
i
to
sicrhau bod gyn
support
nhw
young
gyfle
people,
i
to
gael
ensure that they
gyrfa
have an opportunity
yma
to have a
rhywle
career
yn y gogledd,
somewhere in the north
wedi iddyn nhw dderbyn yr
after
hyfforddiant a'r
they
cefnogaeth yna.
receive the
Dwi'n
training
gwybod
and
bod
support.
materion
I know
ariannol bob
there are
amser
financial
yn ein
matters
meddyliau ni,
always in our
ond dwi'n
minds.
meddwl hefyd
However,
bod na gyfle fan hyn i ni
I think there is
wneud
an
gwahaniaeth.
opportunity
Felly,
to make a difference.
jyst gofyn y cwestiwn i weld os allwn ni gyflawni mwy
I'm just asking
a chefnogi
whether or
y
not we
pobl
can
ifanc yma sydd yn dod trwy
support
ddol
these
yn
young
flynyddol
people.
gyda llaw. Felly, gyda hynny, na i ddod i stop hapus i
So
ateb unrhyw
I'll
gwestiwn
pause
neu
there.
dderbyn
I'm
unrhyw
happy to answer
sylw
any
ar
questions
y
or
droddiad
comments.
yna. Dwi'n gweld mae Wrtha efo sylw i wneud, Wrtha gynta.
Eartha, first of all.
Just rhywbeth bach efo chorau. Ma'n nhw yn
Just
rili
something
bwysig o'n i'n gweithio
small.
efo
Choirs.
sector
I
trydydd.
worked with
Yeah.
a
Ma'n gwneud mwy
choir
na
in the third
cymdeithasu.
sector, and
Ma'n
it's
gael
more than
effaith
socialising.
enfawr i
It
wella
has a
pobl
very
efo iechyd
big
meddwl,
impact
hefyd
on
yn
people with
corfforol,
mental
achos
health
ti'n
issues,
angen
but
dyffryn.
physically
Ydy.
as well.
Hynny yn wych
Ydy.
i pobl
It's
treuna'n
wonderful
wella,
for people
yn
to
cael effaith
feel
ar,
better. It
iechyd
has an
nhw yn-
impact
Ydy.
on
yn
health
gyfeiriad. So just
generally.
rhywbeth bach o'n i
So
eisiau
just a little comment
Yeah.
there.
Cytuno gant y cant.
Agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
Gareth?
thanks. I just wanted to echo what you said about young people and the projects that, because I had the opportunity to
Yes.
visit the other one of the other graduations, because you were on holiday, which I know is a very rare occurrence. But it was absolutely joyous, and particularly meeting the young people, but their parent or parent who, you know, was so positive about the fact we had given their children opportunity that they hadn't really managed to have in their school system. So, you know, it was really positive, and I would like to commend the work that, you know, our colleagues who deal with that programme
agree. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's a pleasure to see the way some of the young people have progressed through that programme. So yeah, really good. Dyfed?
Just and sydyn ar y pwynt yna, dwi'n meddwl
Just briefly on that point, I think it's something that the People and Community and Culture Committee will be looking at this and how we can drive this. There is an excellent young man in the Ysbyty Gwynedd who's graduated from this scheme, and he's volunteering on the front desk at the moment, a gentleman called Rodri. If you have the pleasure of meeting him, he encapsulates what comes out of this scheme and how we can support further as a board. It's great to see.
Diolch am yr ateb,
Thank you for those responses. And as a chair of the People and Cultures Committee, is it possible for us to look at what the programme achieves and then consider whether or not there's anything else we can do to support them further? I understand there is no magic wand because of the financial situation, but it is worth looking, I think, on what practical things we can do to support young people as the main employer, and as an employer has health and well-being at the heart of what we do. Thank you. Vaughan, just to add, as the second employer, the government, sorry, the local authorities are the second highest employer, and there are transferable skills. Local authorities can't achieve the same as the health board, but it's opportunity maybe to move to local authorities afterwards. There is an opportunity to work in partnership, certainly. Something for consideration.
Rwy'n arall am sylw ni gwestiwn adroddiad yna. Mae'n adroddiad gwybodaeth.
It's for information. Everyone happy to accept that report. Thank you.
Ymlaen at adroddiad nesaf.
We'll move on to the next item. Carol,
adroddiad Prifweithredwr eitem
Chief Exec's report.
Carol.
Bore da pawb, Carol Shilby dwi. Morning all. Thanks very much for the slot as usual on my report. There's quite a bit to cover, so I hope the report was helpful. The first thing just to draw attention to is the announcement that Welsh Government Cabinet Secretary made around the assessment of maternity and neonatal services. There's been a significant area of work across the UK actually in terms of maternity services, and from my own personal background, involved in maternity services many moons ago. This is a really key area that we have to keep revisiting with fresh eyes to examine practice, but in particular to really focus on the experience of people who are involved in that. So it's with that in mind that we're very keen to be actively involved in the assessment. We're very keen that we can get ahead of the work that is required, and colleagues will remember that we approved the business case for a digital system around maternity, which will help us enormously, and that is being implemented now. So we know that we've been focusing on improvements, and this provides us with another opportunity to do just that. And I have got a chance to meet some families who have been recipients of our care to hear their stories directly. Just moving on to some of the interactions that we've had with government. David, you mentioned some of the Cabinet Secretary's priorities. We continue to have quarterly meetings with the Welsh Government in relation to special measures assurance, and that meets the latest of those meetings was held just a couple of weeks ago. We had a good meeting, actually, a positive meeting, and the Welsh Government officials noted some important and significant progress, and that was really reflected in the report that was published by the Welsh Government on the 15th of July, and hopefully colleagues have been able to see that. I draw out some of the conclusions from that report. At this stage, the Cabinet Secretary's determination is that we remain at level 5. I have put hopefully there was quite a few changes in the escalation status of a number of health boards, so I've put them there. Hopefully it's helpful. It is a little bit complex because some of the domains you can be in for certain things, you know, so just mapping that through. The reason I sort of put that there is that there have been some very important changes to the oversight and escalation arrangements, and they were announced by the Cabinet Secretary in the same announcement. So we continue to work to deliver our plan, and if we deliver our plan, we will improve, and improvement will lead to de-escalations. So we're really clear about that. Just a couple of sort of team notices, really, and I know colleagues will be very familiar with George being around the table, but it is to recognise that she now joins us as the Interim Executive Director. So thank you very much, George, for stepping forward at this stage. Steve is on leave today, but we'll have a chance to see him because although he's announced his retirement after 37 years, he will be with us through September. And then there is an ask of the board in relation to strategic planning and service change. We have increasingly been focused on the strategy for the organisation and how we interact with our partners. Our health board is a few steps ahead of us, actually, and been really doing a lot of work on their clinical services plan that does have potential impact for our population. So we're working with Hywel on what that might mean for us. We will be responding to the consultation process, and I'm going to ask the board that they delegate that final submission back to Hywel, to myself and yourself, David, if that's okay. And then finally, I got the chance to get out, which I felt like it was my summer tour. It was absolutely fantastic to have quite an intensive week of visits. Some of it was actually just wandering around the sites and chatting to anyone I could come across. So sorry if I popped up unannounced in a couple of places. And I'm in danger of trying to pull out a couple of visits and then not others. But without exception, I got a huge amount out of the visits, the conversations, the walkthrough. You know, I did a great visit at Wrexham Myler and looked at the environment, the challenges that the environment brings. Went across to Holyhead with Vaughan and colleagues, so that was a great visit about the potential for the future for one of our key areas of population. And just to say, I visited a community garden, which was absolutely brilliant. I've given Stuart a bit of a list of can we do this, can we do that, but really showed the ability of us in terms of working with people in our community, actually, for that wider wellbeing benefit, both for theirs, but also for our staff and wider public. So quite a varied month, from Welsh Government meetings all the way through to community visits. I have included confirmation as an appendix of the oversight arrangements, just for the record as well.
Diolch yn iawn. Diolch yn fawr, Carol, am yr adroddiad ac am y gwaith yn ystod y...
Thank you, Carol, for the report and the work in the last 2 months. Any questions or comments?
Gareth?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just wanted to welcome the fact Carol did do a summer tour, and I think it's really, I mean, I don't underestimate how much pressure you, particularly you, but also all the executives are under, but it's so important to be seen. And so I really, really welcome that. I just wanted to say as well that I was quite struck that in all three of our reports, and I'm not speaking about mine, but we all have very positive experience of interactions with the council in Anglesey. And I do want to single them out. I mean, we have a very great collaborator here, but it does occur to me that sometimes I get a bit frustrated that we're not trying things out. I mean, I'm a great believer in equity, and I don't like the word pilots, but sometimes we should try things out. And I think when we do want to do things in partnership with local authorities, we can really build on that. I've got a few particular ideas, but that's just, it just struck me that all three of us separately, because we don't collaborate on this, we did sort of said, oh, we had really useful interactions. And I just want to thank the council as well for that and receiving me recently as well.
So full of possibilities, Carol.
And actually, it's all well and good going to it. It was a great, little walk around, and we had a look at a potential site for development, and had a look at the potential of modern environments that bring communities and people together. But the plan now is actually we're going to the next steps of getting a workshop there at the end of September, and moving some germs of ideas into action. And the board has previously considered development work in Holyhead, and I can certainly see the potential impact that we could have positively in the local area. So it's translating the visits into action.
Diolch yn iawn. Unrhyw un arall? Os nad oes pawb yn hapus I dderbyn y adroddiad yna.
Unless there are any other comments, everyone happy to accept and approve the report and delegate the response that Carol mentioned
I Carol ar fi'n fel Prifysgwydr Gadeirydd.
to Carol and I as chair.
Everyone
happy?
Diolch yn iawn.
Thank you.
Ymlaen at adroddiad nesa ar eitem 1.8.
We'll move on to the next item, 1.8, is the report of the Vice Chair.
I'm not really going to introduce this. I know colleagues are very good at reading papers, very happy to answer questions. Had like Carol, had continued to do a programme of visits, and in general, I'm really inspired by the work that's done by a lot of our staff in difficult circumstances. So, that's the overwhelming impression I get. But I'm very happy to answer specific questions either here or outside the meeting.
Diolch yn iawn, Gareth, ac diolch just ar ran y bwrdd am y gwaith.
Thank you to the board also for the work achieved and the visits. I know are appreciated in the past 2 months. Any questions or comments on Gareth's report? Priam.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Guy, but the Confederation Expo you attended sounds absolutely fascinating. I know it was in England, but there's many lessons for us. And I just wonder, is there anything that came out of that you really want us as Betsy to take on board and maybe pilot or develop?
I'm really, there's quite a few things actually, but I really think we should be looking at the project on discharge to assess, which was done, and that's one again where I'm thinking that actually perhaps could work with colleagues, particularly in Ismail. And the other one was the work that had been done in West Berkshire in terms of working with the third sector to proactively contact people who were lived in deprived areas. And I want to emphasize that because it's not the same as saying they were deprived. You don't know that, but and did not have regular contact with their GPs to offer them point of care testing. And most importantly, the fact that the whole project was structured around and it wasn't a small number, 43 if I remember rightly, GP practices, who both trawl through their data to produce the list of the people and the contact details of who should be contacted, and then also undertook that because, and I think we are working on having the same solution, because the point of care testing could be fed directly back to the surgeries that then followed up where they'd identified issues. And, you know, I just think we ought to be, and I know there are always different issues, and they were quite clear. There'd been a lot of issues about, you know, in the jargon GDPR about sharing confidential information. But you know, if they can do it, and what I said, it wasn't one of the, we often say, oh, we're so big, it's only, but you know, 43 practices, it's less than us, but it's still big. And I think a population of 600,000 or something.
Sorry, can I just come back on that then? So are we likely to get some progress on one or both or something else arising from this in the next, say, 12 months? Or
I guess that's for other people. I mean, I think
I'm just throwing it out there.
You know, over to me, and I think great, because you know, I mean, basically our role, as you know, is to sort of offer up ideas, isn't it? But then, and I appreciate that sometimes ideas from us or from me, you know, may be put forward in ignorance of what the problems or issues are. So you know, but I think Tamina is probably best placed to comment on that.
Tamina, response to that, please.
Diolch. Dwi'n meddwl dwi prif swyddog gweithredu dwi a couple of things actually. I know the programme you're talking about in West Berkshire because I was involved to some extent from a community mental health perspective, so I'm really happy to make contact with people involved in that. There's 2 or 3 things going on. It's probably worth just flagging. There's a programme actually being led by the Welsh Government, I think P&I, around building community capacity, and one element of those is looking at the sort of 0.5% high risk group of patients or residents in North Wales. I think we can go further and faster around that. We've internally set ourselves an ambition around identifying that maybe the top 2% of patients most at risk of interfacing with different parts of the health and social care services in their local community. And there are some really good models, and Berkshire West is one of those, where you can identify through a really good formula or calculation those people either most at risk as they have comorbidities, or who are intersecting inappropriately with a range of different services. So lots of ideas and lots of opportunities around there. And similarly, I think the discharge element of it, Gareth, I've had some really good conversations with local authority colleagues around how we can do some work on that. But I also know people like Jane Troman in the board are already working really hard on that, and it links to some of the strategic work we're doing also around UEC and the 6 goals, which is obviously looking at holding people as close to home as possible. But if they do need to go through an ED and end up being admitted, that we have some really appropriate discharge mechanisms for the local authority colleagues to get them to where they need to be as soon as possible. I think it relates to another conversation we had yesterday about how we start to really profile the work we're doing in primary community services. So it'd be really helpful maybe in a board development session to look at that in more detail.
Chris, unrhyw arall? Os nad oes, gawn ni diolch I Gareth.
There are no further comments. Can we thank Gareth for the report? Thank you.
Ymlaen ni at eitem.
On to item 2.1. We have a list of strategic items. First one is learning from financial matters for the 21-22. And this report is now on the website and has been held back with an embargo until this morning. If you're keen to see the report, it's now available on the website and has been since 9:15 this morning. An opportunity for you to read this, and I'll turn to Carol as the Chief Exec to present. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So this report covers a key matter at its heart is really around accountancy practice that happened 3 years ago in 2021-22. Now I joined the Health Board as interim chief exec in May 2023, and I must be honest, this was one of the biggest, most major issues that I had needed to manage. What became very clear to me pretty quickly actually was that actually this was quite a complex matter, and the context in particular was very important. And this is something that therefore has taken quite a considerable time to work through. So the report today is my report as accountable officer. And for those that don't know, being an accountable officer is a designation that is given by the Welsh Government in reflection of my responsibilities regarding governance and probity. So that's why it's called Accounting Officer Report, because it has that level of sort of responsibility, if you like. And the report is a summary, really, of what happened, and most importantly, the context of the organisation at that time. And that's really important, just to take that wider view, because the learning that has needed to be identified was not solely around the core issue. In order for us to take the action that is needed to safeguard an event happening in the future. There are many people and different parties involved in this situation, and I am sure, or really I know, that there will be very different views on aspects of my report. So I have tried, however, to make sure that this is my assessment based on the information that has been available to me, and I've had a lot of information, and I think it's important that, you know, I can thank colleagues who have undertaken work. Mostly they are external to the Core Health Board, and particularly internal audit, and Audit Wales, actually, colleagues as well. So in regard to all of that, I am trying to balance here matters that are in the public interest, but also we've got a responsibility to those individuals and the parties involved. So that's the balance I'm trying to get here. And just before I go into the report, you know, I think it's important to recognise that this matter's been very difficult for the people involved, actually for wider departments in the organisation and the health board more generally, really. So I'm hoping that bringing this sort of final report means that, you know, having brought the issues, the learning and the action, we can actually now start to move forward. I'm just going to pull out a couple of key areas, David, if that's okay. So the big issue are really around governance and probity that leads to confidence, trust and confidence in us as an organisation. Is we actually had accounts qualified in, there are probably very few people around this table who were around at that time, but that's a very significant situation to have occurred, and therefore is a very serious matter for a health board that handles £2.5 billion of public money, and hence, you know, the importance with which we have taken matters in hand and act upon them. The circumstance of what actually happened, and there was an investigation into, well, why did we get to a position of the health board at the time get to that position of an accounts qualification. And it's important to give it a bit of the context, because I remember where I was in 2021, 22, we were still coming out of the pandemic. And unusually for NHS organisations, many organisations were managing a financial context where there was actually more money around than there usually is. So in our reports later on, we're going to be talking about how we manage, to make sure we don't have a deficit. Actually, at the time, the health board was managing what would look like they would have a surplus. And so they were looking to spend those resources that had been allocated for the people of North Wales, actually for the people of North Wales, rather than return the monies. The process around that was examined, and I think at its heart, the expenditure that was planned did not deliver goods in year. So when you buy something, you might be on dodgy territory, you've got an accountant or two in the room, but I remember even as a senior nurse, if you're going to buy some goods at the end, towards the end of the year, they had to be received in order for that to be accounted for. And that is really at the core of this. So the money was accounted and the goods not received. And then there were issues about the process and the transparency of that followed. What's really important for me to stress, because I know there's been a lot of sort of concern around this, is that there is no evidence through all of the work that's happened that there was any monies lost to the organisation at the time. So it's important to just try to emphasise that really. So that was the core of the issue. But as we were sort of picking up and coming into the organisation, it was clear that there were other issues that presented a wider context and some additional work that needed to take place to understand the relevance and the learning from those areas. And there are 4 areas that I draw on in my report. The first of those relates to contract procurement and management. And as a large public sector organisation with that £2.5 billion budget, we do buy services on a very regular basis. So this is quite an important area of practice. I was very grateful to the internal audit service for undertaking at very short notice a review into the practice in the organisation, and I outline in my report a specific issue in relation to the procurement of a piece of work that looked at the core issues, and that highlighted issues around how the procurement processes were being implemented in the organisation, and that has brought some significant learning. I also asked for an assessment of the HR processes and in particular how they had impacted on people involved in the core issue, and that also brought learning, in particular the challenge when there are going to be investigations about how well informed and engaged staff are in those processes. And I make reference in the back end of my report to the salmon principles, which are used for public inquiries. So the staff involved were not fully aware of the nature and the scope of the investigation. And that is something that, you know, I personally feel very strongly needs to be attended to. The next issue that we looked at was in relation to information governance. The investigation report undertaken by a third party was disclosed without authorization. And that clearly is a breach in terms of the data protection legislation and regulations. And that, although it's a complex area, it was very clearly a breach. And we referred ourselves to the Information Commissioner's Office as a health board as soon came very well in my first 3 weeks. Undertook an external commission and external review, and I will come on to the findings there shortly. And then the 4th issue, which, as we discussed as a board on many occasions, leadership culture is so key to the successful to a successful organisation, a healthy organisation. And what was clear to me as I arrived here is that there were some really significant challenges, and they had been described by Audit Wales in the board effectiveness work that they did, and they reported in February 2023. And that was an important context, I think, for these issues that occurred. So just that's really what happens in don't know, 3-4 minutes. The really key thing has been, well, what's been the learning and the action that's been taken. So I hope colleagues will spend as much, if not more time, when they read the report in detail on what we've done as a result of this. As a board that has needed to grapple with some really key issues, I think these have been ones that have really surfaced towards the top of our priority list. So on leadership, culture and governance, I don't need to remind the board that we committed to 9 strategic intent statements back in September 2023 that really focused on leadership and culture, and the work that we've got underway on the culture change programme. I know, and David from a People and Culture Committee is overseeing that work. Our openness and our transparency has been commented on by Audit Wales, and our big focus during this year, as well as last, and will be into next year, is laying the foundations for the future in terms of how we operate as an organisation. So some very clear work that we have undertaken on leadership, culture and governance in the organisation, and I've just drawn out in my report some of the reflections from Audit Wales. Significant work has been undertaken in terms of financial governance, and outlined in the report are 5 key areas of that improvement plan, and in particular really focusing on financial governance mechanisms in the organisation and the financial control environment action plan. A scheme of reservation and delegation doesn't often get many people jumping out of bed in the morning, but the visibility of what decisions can be made and by who is now much higher, and that work will continue as we move through. So lots of managers have had training on the sword, and delighted that my colleagues on the executive team provide that advice and guidance on a daily basis to us. On information governance, the external review actually indicated that in general, sound systems and processes were in place, but offered a number of suggested improvements that have been taken forward, and most of those have been completed. 1 or 2 areas where there's partial completion, and we continue to work in that area. On procurement and contract management, this is an area we continue to work on. Huge amounts of progress made on this, and I know the audit committee has a close oversight of the work that happens here. Increased visibility and reporting of compliance. Any breaches come through that report with a learning action following that, and we have seen a significant reduction in things like single tender waivers, etc. So the tangible progress and the results of the work can be seen by all. The development of training, so for example, around 500 of our managers have had procurement training, including myself, of retraining. And the chap said, "Do you have this in your last job, Carol?" And I have it in this one. So they've been actually very, very supportive, the NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, in supporting our work here. And then finally, the other part was on HR processes, and we'd set this as a key area for development from the start of our work when we were setting our special measures response plan and our annual plans, and that work has been continuing. And getting a fresh approach to preventing things like employee harm, and I think it's a bit of a movement across the NHS family, if you like, across the UK now in this regard, and so working closely with trade unions on that is important. But I will say that our processes, although this was a very complex situation, took much longer than anyone would have wanted, and we do have the oversight of those process timelines much more visible at this stage. So, David, I've taken a little bit longer because, you know, there may be people who haven't yet read the report, so trying to draw out some of the key elements. And the board members will have wanted to take quite a lot of care in reading the report. It does, I hope, demonstrate the openness and transparency with which we wanted to operate. And, you know, in a way, the reason for publishing this report for me is that the interest, and it is of public interest in how we utilise resources, our governance and our probity. I hope it provides an opportunity for us now to draw together all of the learning and the action and move to the next stage. Yeah.
Carol, can I also, I think as you've outlined, this has been, I think, on your desk ever since you came into the health board and others as well. And it's been a tremendous amount of work, taking a lot of time and energy, not just for yourself, but others. So I think it's important that we thank you for all the efforts, yourself and everybody who's been involved, and that does include some independent members as well who've had a role to play in some of this. I think you've also put an important emphasis on we can't turn the clock back. You know, this is something that landed with you, myself, and others that had happened over a period, but you put the emphasis very much on, well, there's something here for us to learn as a public body, as an NHS organisation, that will help us improve, actually. And everything that's happened and whoever's been affected, the best thing we can do, as people tell us frequently, is to put things right. So I think your report really emphasises that. And just a final comment from myself, there's a lot to talk about accountancy practice, finances, but you've also said this is as much about the culture of an organisation as anything else. And the work we're doing, led by George and others, and oversight from David and the committee, is so crucial to everything we do. You know, it is true that culture impacts on everything. And what is culture? Well, culture is how people treat each other. Culture is what we expect from each other, and culture is about relationships. So that emphasis, I think, is really timely and important. Right. I'm going to ask for any questions or comments, and our role today is to accept the report and then ensure that the learning that has been signalled is able to be implemented and acted upon. Bertha, dros at ti gynta.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. I'm sure we all feel this, Carol, but I wanted to say personally that I really valued the clarity in that narrative of quite a messy part of the history of Betsy Cadwaladr. I found that really clear. It really helped me understand, you know, the significance and how things were dealt with. I just want to thank you for that. It's really important. Thank you.
Diolch yn iawn, Bertha. Just check your David, a wedyn na I droi at Gareth wedyn.
Gyfed and then Gareth.
Yeah, diolch. Dwi jyst isio ategu.
I just wanted to repeat what has been said already about the importance of culture and leadership and governance and how important that is. I don't think quite often it doesn't make the headings or headlines, and that's the underpinning of everything else and of improvement. And it's important to remember that Audit Wales have reported on that for the board, and I think that's very important moving forward. Not to draw a line under it, but to show that we've learned lessons. We're moving forward.
Gareth, that's a T.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to echo Eartha's point. I thought this was an incredibly clear and very well put report, and your verbal report also, Carol, so thank you for that. And then two other points really about learning. I think the first one is just to underline the point you made about training on procurement, because at the root of this were two issues about procurement, weren't they? One was about what the steps were taken, which were, controversial and led to the qualification, and then actually the way some of the investigations were procured. So getting our procurement practice right is absolutely critical. And I know, as Chair of Finance, that a lot of effort's gone into that, and you referenced the 500 senior managers being trained. So I think that is really important. I just want to be clear that that has already happened, and I'm sure that will continue. The second point, and this is sort of more outside my expertise because I don't sit on the People and Culture Committee, but the real learning on the HR aspects, I think. And it seems to me, there's the old saying, isn't there, 2 wrongs don't make a right. And that really is how a lot of this reads. So we can't prevent, we should do everything we can to minimise the risk of, we can't prevent people doing wrong things or things which are not within the way they should act. But we are absolutely responsible for the way we go about investigating those. And this clearly wasn't a particularly glorious example of it. I know it was very complicated, very extreme, and I wasn't there at the time, so I don't want to, pretend it was simple. But I do know that there are other investigations, and both on respect to resolution and on disciplinaries, that have dragged on a very long time. And I just think, while time isn't just of the essence, the point you make about employee harm is a real one.
Yes.
That to leave people often suspended from their jobs, and it's supposedly a neutral act, but everybody knows when you've been suspended, and in local communities. So speed is really important, as well as getting the result out, of course. So I just really wanted to ask David and George just for assurance that we have systems to monitor how long things have been taking, and that we have a sort of escalation system when things are dragging on. And as I said, I know sometimes you can't avoid it, but we really need to do everything we can to make sure that these sorts of circumstances aren't perpetuated or repeated.
Diolch yn iawn. Russ wants to come in next, I think. Russ.
Diolch, Chair. Yeah, so just really to add to some comments more than anything. So first of all, to thank Carol on the articulation of the journey over the last few years. I think there's a need to recognise through Audit Committee the oversight and stewardship on this difficult matter through Karen's leadership through that forum, as well through the independent member forums and the Committee of the Health Board, which I think has been a real challenging environment for us to move forwards with, and that's been done fabulously well. I also want to just reflect on the organisations that supported as well. So, of course, NHS Wales procurement team, shared services, their training through the organisation, the recent changes to procurement regulations and the further refresher training that we've already initiated. So we're absolutely key to keep on top of that as we go forwards. Audit Wales colleagues and internal audit as well play key roles in how we move forward. But also the finance function and the wider organisation, because this is a wider organisation context that we're talking about changing that cultural aspects. I think in terms of looking forward as well, I just wanted to focus on, of course, we have had 2 unqualified audit opinions since that point. Audit Wales colleagues have been in, reviewed our accounts and given us a true and fair view. So all of our financial statements are reflecting a true and fair view going forwards. And give you an indication on that transparency and openness that we wish to maintain. So we are one of the very few health boards who've managed to map all of our financial statement transaction values back to our source ledgers. So the reason that's important is Audit Wales, who come in and review that as independent bodies, can literally check every figure in our financial statements right back to the source ledger. And I think that's an absolute credit to the finance team to be able to pull that off. And Simon's done a fabulous job leading that piece of work. But that is a real key commitment for us to have that open and transparent culture in the organisation. Diolch, Chair.
think they call that traceability in the farming world, don't they? Similar thing in a way. You mentioned the finances and Carol had her report, and I just wanted one opportunity maybe for some clarification, because what we've done as a health board, we've watched some of this play out in the public domain and elsewhere, and a whole host of comments made by so many people, and others can judge whether they were informed comments or not. And some of the headlines were, to put it lightly, misleading. And one of the headlines, and something has been repeated, is the missing millions. So I think your report has answered that question, but just for clarity, can I just ask you to make that statement finally, please?
Yeah, thanks, David. And and it is a highly impactful issue, and if it is still in the public mind, I'm really pleased to be able to say that all of the work that's happened, and I will reference the work in a moment, there's no evidence that any money is missing. No. So that's probably as clear as we can be. And so who says that? So the core investigator that was commissioned at the time, the County Ford Wales Service took a look at this issue, and North Wales Police took a look at this issue. So this isn't me saying, this is the work of multiple external bodies. So hopefully that clears that up.
Thank you very much. That was very useful. Pam, you have some comments, I think, on this report too.
Diolch. When dydw i cyfarwyddo Llywodraethu Corfforaethol. I'm Pam Wenger, I'm the Director of Corporate Governance for the Health Board and have been in post since 2024. And I suppose I just wanted to reflect and build on some of the comments in Carol's report as a public body in terms of the way in which we conduct our business in an open and transparent way. I think this report demonstrates out the way that we work. That's been validated, certainly since my commencement in the health board, through the way the board works, the way the committees work, where we operate in the public domain. And I think that's really important, and just in line with the Nolan principles of public life in terms of our accountability as a board. So I do think I just really wanted to reflect in terms of the public interest, in terms of the candour and the way in which the board is reporting this, in terms of the learning as an organisation, and to ensure that we have the highest standards of governance in the health board as is required as a public body. And I just sort of to recap, really thanks to Karen as chair of audit committee, our head of internal audit team and Audit Wales, in terms of the way in which certainly over the last year or so, in terms of the way in which the audit committee have really scrutinised and sought assurances on a whole range of governance and financial matters through to the board. So I suppose wanted to put that as a matter of record and some reflections, David, since my tenure as the health board, and the way in which we will continue to improve our governance as validated by other external bodies. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn iawn, Pam. So Carol, just to round up this item for us, please, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you very much for the comments and contributions. It's been a tricky report to write, to try to outline in the clearest and most understandable terms that looks actually quite complex. So thank you for the feedback. That we're trying to do that. I just want to pull up just a response to a couple of areas, and Gareth's comments about when things go wrong. In my experience, I'm not really talking about this particular case, but generally in my experience, when things go wrong, on the whole, people have tried to do the right thing, right kid with the right intent, and something has gone wrong. And it's how an organisation can deal with that is probably the mark of the organisation. So that's just a general comment. And of course, you know, we are sharpening some of our processes of, you know, visibility, openness around processes, and really about the experience of people, whether that's citizens or whether that's our staff. But on the whole, I think tried to bring together all of those elements. It was a clearly very difficult time for the health board at that time. And a very challenging set of circumstances that people were grappling with. I think we have, in a way, the benefit of being able to take all of that with some of the fresh eyes that we have brought and translate that into action and improvement for ourselves. So, and that's the focus that I wanted to try to give here. Something very difficult happened. We've taken the learning and we've acted, and we've got evidence of impact of the actions that we've taken. So part of our improvement journey, I guess, you know, as an organisation, and this will, I hope, mark, you know, quite a major sort of milestone now as we move forward. So thanks to everyone who's helped with this work. It's been really significant and impactful at a personal as well as professional level.
Absolutely. Diolch yn iawn. Felly, dyn ni nodi'r eitem yna gyda diolch I bawb sydd wedi cyfrannu, a diolch yn sicr I Carol fel y swyddog.
And thank
Ymlaen at yr
Carol
eitem
as the accountable officer.
2.2 ar maes gofal wedi gynllunio.
2.2
Mae ni adroddiad
planned care.
Ac dwi am droi atras fel y
I'll turn to Russ
I gyflwyno'r adroddiad.
to present the report.
Diolch, Chair. So I will give you some key headlines from the report and then give members the opportunity then to ask questions. Then from the report, I'll take as read. So key headlines really, planned care. This is really about how we are improving access in a timely manner to care for our local population. And this is about the journey through a planned care lens, specifically really looking at the extreme weights classification or patients waiting over 104 weeks for all stages of their care to complete. A little bit about the health board in terms of the lead up to the start of the current financial year. So we effectively had a £34 million allocation from Welsh Government, and we used that resource to target reductions in our extreme weight positions. And we moved from what was a December position of just over 10,000 patients waiting over 104 weeks to just over 5,700 patients. So we saw a 43% reduction in those extreme weights. We did that at the same time, of course, as servicing the additional patients that came on stream for that demand. So we utilised that resource effectively to improve that position. But that means we were still circa 70% of the patients waiting beyond that period at the close of the financial year, so 31st of March 2026. What's happened in 25-26 is a real focus on support for improvements in these planned care area for the group. There's a notation in the report, but essentially we received as a health board a further £5 million, which we committed to additional contractual provision in order to support reductions in healthcare provision in the first quarter of the year. There's another £6 million allocation for the health board to support cataract provision and servicing cataracts as we move forwards. And then in addition to that, we've received just over £3 million for support with diagnostics care. There's also two national exercises, essentially one national tender profile for 45,000 first outpatient appointments. We've completed that tender exercise and we are in mobilisation to see all of those patients, of course, which is a significant number and significant volume of patients to see. We've got a further 15,000 patients that we'll see through a local model. Both of those elements will be paid based on patients seen, patient numbers seen. So the money will come across as we see those patients. So these block contracts are moving away, and it's more about if we see the patients, we get resource for the patients. There is risk to that second elements of the model, so we haven't yet get the funding confirmed for diagnostic aspects of that care. So to get to stage 3 for diagnostic and treatment, or not onwards to procedure, which is stage 4 treatment, and we don't have resource for stage 4, so we won't be able to complete the pathway. It's not a full pathway commission. What that means is our patients could go through a stage 1 appointment, a diagnostic, a decision to treat, and then be reverted back to the books of the health board. And we may need to repeat a outpatient appointment for those individuals because of that transition from an outsourced provider, effectively, or an insourced provider, or a third party, back to the healthcare provision. So there are risks to that, but this is good news. This is significant resource that is being allocated to support healthcare on a planned care basis. There is also some resource for administration consequences and costs of that as well. Just briefly talking about our future plans. So we were targeting 4,950 patients at the 30th of June. We moved that position to 5,300. We missed that slightly, but that's largely down to mobilisation of those contracts, and it still represents a 47% reduction in patients waiting within what is a 6-month period. There's a real focus. Our target to the 30th of September, 2,800 patients waiting in that category, and that will be a 73% reduction in patients waiting what is deemed an extreme wait of time. And we're moving on to December, where we're committed to having 0 patients waiting that time. So I still remember 12 months ago talking about 208 weeks, and now we're saying by December, within 12 months, we'll have 0, 104 weeks. That's not without risk, colleagues. So just to make members aware, of course, there are lots of key specialties in this. Orthodontics, for example, is a real challenge specialty, and we are working with Welsh Government colleagues as to how we can have solutions to ensure we can hit that 0 target as we move forward. But 31st of December is our targeted position to eradicate the 104 waits. I'll talk briefly about diagnostics, if I may. Diagnostics care. So we have had a further 3.6 million. Our diagnostics rates have significantly increased, largely radiology, endoscopy. The resources we've received will support those, and we have diverted resource as well into these areas from the £34 million for insourced contracts for radiology. That will be key for us as well in being able to service the patient demands. But that's an 8-week diagnostic target. And then really just to round off, I guess, the challenge here is not to keep having to use additionality to service our patients. So how are we going to move our models of care to our theatres, our clinics? We're utilising all of our facilities to the best use possible, using official standards of care, GERF standards, potentially recognised industry standards, and comparing those to our current performance metrics and seeing if we can improve and enhance our delivery. And I think we've got some good examples of where we will move that forward. And just to mention, there is a planned care programme board, and planned care is a major work stream. And I'm looking at Carol, as I mentioned those 2 things, which are absolutely focusing on making sure that we have sustainable services moving forwards, and we move away from this reliance. And of course, the upshot to that is we're not treating patients in the most expensive way we could with this additionality, and that resource is then free, of course, for us to use to enhance patient care across the health board. So those are the challenges before us. There are 6 key work streams. We've flagged those within the report, and I'll leave it at that, if I may, Chair, and open to questions.
Diolch yn iawn. Diolch o'r rheswm yr adroddiad cynhwysfawr yna.
Thank you, Russ, for that comprehensive report. The report today is one of a series where we give attention to a specific matter in a board meeting, and today this is the subject of planned care, which is a common theme in our work. Questions, comments? And I know that others would like to come in. Mike, over to you.
This has been through committee, so thank you for the paper. just one, I have a couple of questions on one item, and that is relevant to the workstream table on page 70, and particularly workstream 5 on follow-up. So we had some discussion in committee about our follow-up to news ratio. Do we have an idea of how much out of kilter we are with the capita benchmarks at this stage? So the reason I'm asking that question is it going to be a big help to ask directorates to review their follow-up strategies, do we think? That's my first question. The second one is, have we given thought to things like news-only clinics, where clinics are not hampered by the number of follow-ups? We've got GPs who are perfectly capable of following up routine surgical procedures from my own clinical experience, but often there's a bit of a culture that quite like to see your operated patients on 6 weeks later and see them well, but it's not necessary in these days of more minimally invasive approaches to surgery, and I'm sure it applies to some other non-surgical issues as well.
Yeah. So what I'm going to take some questions and comments, and we will ask colleagues to respond accordingly. And some good news is the aircon is now working. So, no need for any medical intervention. So, dwi'n meddwl nesa oedd Rhian.
Next, Rhian then Eartha. Karen, did you want to come in as well and Vaughan? In that order.
Yeah.
Just quickly, for clarification, there was a bit I didn't quite understand as to how you juggle urgent and treat and turn. How they come together or not, and does one trump the other, or how do you manage that sort of interface with the push to get the 104 weeks? Is one of those two things suffering? That was my first point. And I think the second point, which I was going to raise in the performance report, but I might as well do it now since Russ has already brought it up, is the whole idea of, yes, we're doing this and that through insourcing and outsourcing. We've had extra money to do this, but that's not going to carry on forever, is it? So what's our exit strategy? How are we ensuring that we have the sufficient capacity within the board to have sustainable solutions? Or are some of these mechanisms actually the most effective way of doing the treatments anyway? So I think there are a few issues there, and maybe I can come back to that later on.
Diolch yn iawn. Ti nesa?
Yeah, diolch yn fawr. So I've got a question, and I do share the curiosity that Rhian has explored here. So regarding the outsourcing and insourcing, I'm wondering what percentage that's looking at now, and what's the timeline for getting that reduced? Because obviously, this additionality is not going to continue, so we need to plan forward for that. And then there is a paragraph when you talk about parallel developments, and there's a list of a few items there, but I'm just wondering, what are we doing that we didn't do before? Again, how confident are we that these will get us where we want to be? But I mean, thank you for the report, Russ. I should have started off by saying it. Thank you anyway, but just a couple of questions. Thank you.
Vaughan, ti nesa?
Yeah. Just
question really about table 7. Quite understand. The figures vary significantly across sites. The question is that because we're not operating as one board, that there is a postcode lottery? I don't think that 395 higher referrals in one area than 9 in the other. When are we going to help each other? Because the figures vary significantly. There isn't a similar figure across all 3 areas. I think it also depends on expertise or specialisms as well. Claire, and then Gareth, and then Chris.
Some of the things I was going to ask, both Rhian and Earth have picked up, so just the other one was under point 2 in the report, targeted performance. We referred to the £82 million from Welsh Government and the targets that we're working towards. And it's not only in planned care, is it? So I know it's not for this item today, but I think as a board, we really need to understand our plan around addressing the ambulance handover with patients spending more than 12 hours in ED as well. I just didn't want us to lose sight that that money is also looking at other areas of planned care. So, and I've just heard we're going to look at that in September. So fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, it's the whole system, it's not just one part.
Yeah.
Good point. Gareth,
yeah, just briefly, I was really building on the question from Bertha and Rhiannon. Is that going to be a bit harsh, possibly, but I don't think it's a question of whether we've got the capacity. It's a question of whether the capacity is being used efficiently. And while intrinsically, I think I'm in the same place as Bertha, that ideally I would like to see everything being done internally, except where there's a clear case of, efficiencies of scale and effectiveness where we can't deliver a good service. What I have to say is that the problem is at the moment, it's we got the opposite. I'm going to say the cherry and the bun, but we're actually paying for outsourcing to do stuff that if we were productive, we would be doing with our existing capacity, and we can't go on paying both. That's the real issue. So it is an issue about capacity, but it's really about the efficiency. And I know, that Carol and Russ are very focused. I think we've got a good understanding of the problems. But a bit like I think you were implying, and when we talk about performance report, it seems that we're not seeing a lot of outcomes yet as a result of that focus.
Okay, looking on Gareth. Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Russ, for the report. And it's obviously positive to see such a reduction over a period of time, albeit that they shouldn't really be there in the first place. But my question's around the stages in this full pathway. And I think it probably builds on a comment that Rhea made in passing, which is this the best use of our resources? And I think my concern comes from this. I don't know whether it's a typo or I'm misunderstood, but in respect to the stages, it's said to be insourcing instead of outsourcing. Then one of the risks is that there might well need to be further follow-ups if stage 4 needs to be proceeded to. And it seems to be, is that not a duplication of work? And if it is a duplication of work, then is that the best? Are we using money to look busy, to look like we're doing something, when actually we could be doing something more efficient and using that money in perhaps like, and that might be a very naive way of looking at things, but I wonder that if we're then having to spend extra clinical time on follow-ups that have already been done, that's what's been said, then how do we make the process more efficient and use those to ensure this is sustainable, to build on what other commenters have said? As I say, it might well just be a naive view.
Okay, so lots of questions and comments there on this very important topic, and we've got colleagues here. You can arrange yourselves. Who's going to respond to what? But
should I just explain one thing? So people might be thinking, why is the Director of Finance leading on the planned care report and the work? So just to outline how we're doing this, because it is an absolutely massive agenda for us. As is, as Claire quite rightly points out, urgent emergency care and primary and community care. So we are operating on a number of fronts, and we are going to talk about mental health as well soon as well. So I've taken the mantle on leading the Major Change Programme, which is really about developing those sustainable solutions for both short, medium and long term. Russ has got delivery oversight of the in-year delivery, and Tamina has got lead on deployment of the plan. So the three of us are working very closely daily on ensuring that this massive effort is not just about managing the here and now, but also laying the sort of path to the future. So if I pick up some of the aspects which relate to the change, if that's all right. So Mike, you're absolutely right. There's a big issue about follow-ups, and That's work, that's when we've got work stream specifically on that. And I've heard anecdote, somebody who works in the health board said to me, "Oh, Carol, I've had a letter for a follower to an appointment I had 4 years ago, and I don't think I need the follower." Well, I think that has been, quite common, not just in this health board, but across the NHS. So, all got personal experience and family experience of that.
Indeed.
So.
Yes. Good example.
Yeah. I think the NHS is moving to being much more discerning about who does it really need to see as a follow-up. And there are 3 elements to that. One is, some of this is about self-directed aftercare. How do people look after themselves with support? Some of this is something called see on symptoms, where the patient can come back if they've got this sort of symptom, and the other one is patient-initiated follow-up. So it's I don't need to see you at all unless you have, a problem, and you ring me type of thing. And I think that has been, it's been proven elsewhere, Mike, to start to shift the dial. So when you talk about having more news outpatients, that's really where we are moving to. We're not an outlier in all of our specialties, so it's important to say that, but we have got some specialties where our follow-up rates are out of kilter, but also there's a general move in this practice area. So we are focusing on follow-ups for sure, big piece of work on that. I'll let Russ do the urgent and treat in turn and that interface, but Rhiann's question is really about sustainable solutions. I'm very happy to come back with feedback or whichever committee we were about the detail behind those 6 steps. If we can get those 6 steps systematically implemented per specialty, we will have moved to more sustainable solutions. There are some other wider issues for us to deal with, which is the configuration of services, where we provide services and where and how we provide them. And that is part really of the clinical services plan. So we know in some specialties we're trying to provide them in lots of places where we should probably provide them in fewer to make it more sturdy. I'll let Russ do the outsourcing, insourcing, how long. But these parallel solutions, so the major change programme now has it's very clear programme of work, significant momentum being generated. Just Monday of this week we held 2 workshops. We had the national clinical leads for planned care. Shri, we had good clinical and managerial discussions, so thank you for supporting that. Russ, Angela and other colleagues participated in that, so that's really helpful. And one thing that we're changing already is the pre-operative process. So too many patients keep having to come back because our processes aren't strict now. So we're changing that. And we're all very clear that we will be implementing best practice. It's not up for negotiations. As a board, we've agreed that as part of our organisational principles, design principles. And people welcome the clarity of direction on this. In fact, they've asked me, can you just tell us we've got to do it, Carol? So there's a bit about, being very clear about expectations and then supporting delivery. I think the others are passed to Russ, and if there's anything else to me now.
Russ. Yeah, so I'll just whiz through if I may then, Chair, sorry. So the difference, people do have different categorisations and how they prioritise. In Wales, what happens is if you're an urgent patient, you are seen as a priority, same as urgent suspected cancer, any of those categories. The only treat in turn aspect is if you are registered for a routine procedure. So if you are a routine patient for a routine procedure, you should be treated based on the time waiting for that procedure in an orderly queue effectively. And that's the treat in turn methodology. So if somebody comes along tomorrow and they're urgent, they will be a priority over anyone who is routine and waiting to be treated in turn. So that's why you get that displacement that we have to keep modelling through as we go forwards. So it is a bit of a balance to make sure that we create sufficient capacity to see the urgent suspected cancers. You'll hear that conversation in September. whilst at the same time making sure that we've got capacity to keep servicing the routine patients.
So does that mean that urgent does trump treat and turn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
In terms of timelines now, so we are putting a significant amount of resource into contracts. Certainly in the second quarter of the year, I believe we'll continue that into the third quarter. The challenge around all of that, of course, is then we have to find the resources to pay for all that. And there isn't any more resource made available to us through Welsh Government allocations. And we'll see a little bit more on the finance report as to where the financial standing of the wider NHS Wales sits at present. So you'll see that there possibly isn't additional resources coming through. So then we're faced with tough choices, aren't we? So where are our resources being committed? And we might have to take tough choices to redivert resource to make sure that we give the appropriate access to our patients. I think Chris's point is well made that these patients shouldn't be waiting this time period, and we're absolutely committed to reducing and improving that access time. Whilst, however, developing all of that programme of work, and hopefully that programme of work starts to pick up the mantle. And as it does, and we can profile those improvements and model those improvements through the year, we'll, if you like, lean ourselves away from using that contractual route to treat patients. And what I will say is actually a lot of the specialties that we have, there isn't available contractual provision in the marketplace to see those patients either. So we are absolutely forced to look internally and make sure that we are productive and delivering what we should do through our internal capacity. And that's just good use of public money. Absolutely. It's an absolute responsibility for us to do that anyway.
Can I just add, there are a couple of specialties that there appears there's no capacity for us locally, either internally or externally. And that you've noted that in your report. So I'm wondering, can we put some, ask for some encouragement from Welsh Government to assist us with that, or a solution that will, otherwise those who are waiting for those will be waiting even longer?
We are developing with the Chief Dental Officer a model for how we can support through Welsh Government. There's two particular specialties, oral surgery and orthodontic.
Yes.
We cannot commission activity, capacity does not exist, and we won't be able to do that internally from where we stand. And so it's how they support us to move those models of care forward. So that work is in train.
Yeah, really important.
And to move us into Q3, we've got to keep lifting our heads for Q2 target, but to Q3 to have zero is absolutely paramount. We have a solution now that we can implement so that we get to the 31st of March and we have delivery in that aspect.
Great. Beyond.
I think the variation between sites is a really good question. We need a Betsy list as opposed to a site list, and in some specialties there are no extreme waits, and in others there are significant patients waiting. So we need to get to that cross list, and one specialty, one Betsy model. And I think that will provide some equity across all of our services, and we're on that journey as well, actually. And people are already asking for what they deem as pooled lists. In some areas we have practice where we have consultant lists based on treating turn as opposed to a pooled specialty list by site or by Betsy. So there's a lot to do on that aspect, and you can see there's capacity in some specialties where we shouldn't have those patients waiting. So you have to get one offer from us, of course. In terms of the other questions, I think we've discussed the wider areas, and I think there'll be a paper coming in September. The productivity and efficiency, I think our point is picked up within the 6 key work streams. And I think Chris's question is really good. So essentially within there, what we're talking about here, Chris, is effectively if we transfer a patient out to care through an in-source or outsource provider, and they do their stage 1 appointment, they have to commission full pathway. If we're not commissioning full pathway, then when that patient comes back into the organisation, say they need a procedure, they get to that point, we internally have to repeat that stage 1 new appointment. So it's not follow-up, but we are repeating that appointment again. So it is duplication, absolutely duplication. Welsh Government have directed us towards this route, which will leave us with patients who convert to a procedure that we then have to bring back into the health board potentially, and see again as a first new outpatient. And that isn't the best use of resource, absolutely, through that statement. So it's not a stretch question to me.
No, hang on, got it. Tamina.
Yes, just to follow that up.
Yeah, no, Tamina. I'll bring you in.
You're wrong. So in terms of that, just to the context for this is you're probably aware the Welsh Government have commissioned an additional 200,000 outpatient funds by the end of March. But as part of that commissioning process, which they are funding, they have only funded to stage 3. So as we develop our deployment plans, this stage 3 is to make a decision. So outpatient, a number will convert to diagnostics, and then a number will convert to a stage 4 treatment, but some will be discharged after their diagnostic or after the first outpatient. So as part of our deployment plan, we're looking at what that means for us in this year and into next year as well, to make sure that we're trying to model that in terms of the capacity that we've got. And then just the other thing to pick up on, there is something about having a single list across to North Wales, but I think it links it's also to the clinical services plan that we are really committed to develop as a health board in terms of what our pathways of care are likely to look like. What do we need to deliver locally because there's the volume and the demand, and then what might we do just in one place or in 2 places, and that will vary depending on the kind of specialty that we're looking at. So I think that will also be something that comes through later conversations about the clinical services.
Gareth, on the duplication.
Well, it's on the effort. Why is my question? So it implies that our consultants don't trust the work that's being done by the outsourcer insourcing, because what you're saying is not that there's a pre-op. So say that there's been a diagnosis, there's been a outpatient, a patient has been then had a diagnostic. The conclusion of the service that we've commissioned is that this person needs an operation. What you're saying is that not just that our consultant will have to see them as a part of a pre-operative assessment, but they will have to see them as an outpatient to see whether they agree with the assessment of the external provider. Now, is there an ethical issue there or an issue of regulation? Because what happens internally, and again, we're talking about having one Wales list. So if you've had a consultant in the West who's seen somebody and says they need an operation, and then we have a unified waiting list, and it's a consultant in Wrexham who's going to do the operation, but the consultant in Wrexham say, well, until I've seen them as an outpatient, I won't agree with that diagnosis or that course of action, because that seems to me a really big issue. But it may be that, as I said, it's like Chris, I may be speaking in ignorance, this may be all to do with the professional ethics, but surely at some point you have to trust the expertise of people who are similarly qualified to yourself, rather than redo the work because you personally have not done every stage of the procedure.
So shall I pick that one?
Yeah, there's a combination of things here. I don't want to get into too much detail and into the practice of individuals almost, but so we need to be careful what we say.
Yeah. At the high level, and Mike, Mike will have a view. Most surgeons don't want to just pitch up at the operating theatre and operate on someone they've never seen. It's their professional practice and accountability, so that's the dilemma here.
Yes.
And in a way, from a patient point of view, often you'd like to know who's going to operate on you, So I think there are some probably nuances at the edges of that, Gareth. But and increasingly, of course, once we've dealt with the backlog challenge, this will not be so much of an issue. But I think we're walking a path of just trying to make sure that everyone is content that that procedure is both necessary, but also people are well prepared for it.
I think where I'm coming from is actually less about the insourcing and outsourcing, but the idea of moving to a pan-Betsy approach, which individual consultants don't have their own list. So we really have got to move.
And high volume, low complexity cases, HVLC, that is going to be much more the practice.
And for one list, we need one team. That's the key, isn't it? You can produce one list, but what it means is we've got to work as a team, as people have said. Right, diolch yn iawn am y cyfraniadau lot o bethau pwysig wedi
Thank you for the
nodi
contributions, many important things noted,
sylweddol digwydd yn y maes yma.
and there is significant work, and we're looking forward to seeing the progress.
Ti'n cadeirio Gareth yn edrych ar y maes
And
yma.
the committee that you're chairing, Gareth, will look at the progress and see
symud ymlaen.
how things move on.
Pawb yn hapus I nodi'r
Is everyone
adroddiad yna? Ma' 'na
happy
nifer o
to
bethe
note the
i'w
content? There are a
nodi,
number of
gan
things to note,
lle dyn ni arni ar hyn o bryd o
including
ran y
where we're
perfformiad,
at in relation
lle
to
dyn
our
ni'n disgwyl cyrraedd
performance,
erbyn diwedd
where
y
we
flwyddyn
anticipate
calendar yma,
being by the end
y
of the
risg
calendar
gyda
year, the
ambell
risk
I faes dyn ni 'di cyfeirio
with
ato fo, lle dyn
certain
ni
areas
heb y capacity ar hyn
where
o
we don't
bryd,
have capacity at
ac
the
wrth
moment,
gwrs yr her ariannol
and the
I
financial
ni
challenge
delifro, ma' raid
for
I
us to
sicrhau bod
deliver.
gennyn ni
We have to
felly,
ensure that we have the
felly,
finance.
pawb yn hapus I
Everyone
nodi'r
happy to
adroddiad
note
yma,
the
a dyn ni'n
content,
edrych ymlaen at weld
and we're looking
cynnydd
forward to
a'r
seeing
monitro sy'n digwydd
the
drwy'r
progress and the
pwyllgor
monitoring.
Pawb yn hapus,
Everyone
gwelwch
happy.
yn dda. Diolch yn iawn am y gwaith.
Thank you very
Ma' 'na
much
gwaith sylweddol yn digwydd, a dwi isio
for the
ar ran y
work.
bwrdd
There is
diolch I bawb sy'n
significant work, and I'd like to thank
a'r
everyone
gwaith yna.
connected to that work.
Symudwn ni ymlaen felly i'r eitem nesa.
We'll move on to the next item, 2.3,
Diwedariad
an
ar
update
iechyd
on
meddwl.
mental
Ac
health.
ma' 'na waith pwysig wedi digwydd yn y
Important work
maes
has
hwn,
taken place in this
sydd
area,
yn dod o dan ofal Teresa.
coming
Mae
under
hefyd
Teresa's
peth hon yn cael ei
supervision,
arwain gan
and
Rod sydd ddim efo ni
also Rod,
heddiw, wrth gwrs,
who's
felly
not with us
dwi'n
today.
troi at Teresa
I'll
I
turn to
gyflwyno'r
Teresa
adroddiad,
to
tynnu
present the
allan unrhyw
report
bethe,
and to draw
mae'n awyddus I
anything
danlinellu. Teresa.
that she's keen to outline. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be able to present this report on mental health today and the actions that we've taken in response to the review by the psychiatric college, and there are 10 main themes. I won't go through those. It's quite difficult to comprehend that there's been 12 months since the initial response and 6 months since the last update to the board. But we have been providing updates to the committees, to the Experience and Quality Committee, that has been helpful, hopefully, to the board before starting to go through a few points. I'd like to thank those who've been involved, the members of the public who've helped us to move things forward, the Llais colleagues who've been a great assistance. I see Jeff in the audience today, and also members of the team who've been a part of the group and who've been doing work. Without those important members of staff, we wouldn't have made any progress. I'll repeat it more than once, I'm sure, but as far as the report's concerned, there are 3 parts. I'll start with the first part, which is a declaration by Rose, our specialist advisor. She sent apologies today, Chair. She can't be here today. She's off work today, but I'd like to draw attention to a few things. She's looked at the expert advisory group, the EAG. The EAG. There's been a lot of work and a programme, and we're coming to the end of the work, but of course it doesn't end. It's a journey, isn't it? But there is an agreement, and the contractors are finishing, and we're looking to the future. It's important that we look at what we've done thus far, and Ros has provided some comments of places that are strengthening, where we're showing progress, but where more work is needed. It's been very different work. We've been on a different journey, trying to do things differently. to get different outcomes, which is important to us. We've learnt along the way, and that learning will be important for the future. I think the team have been flexible. We haven't got things right from the start, but I think people have listened, have tried to be flexible, have listened to members of the public, to our users, and have tried to move forward. And the work programme has looked at a number of areas now, and we've reported these to the QSE. I'll draw one comment from Ross out. The comment from Ross on page 8 in the Welsh paper, or the final point in the English part on page 7. I'll read the sentence, if I may. The presence of the Specialist Advisory Group creates more focus on impact and sustainability rather than just completing the improvement plans or steps. And I think that's very important. That's where we've moved to. Because of the help of all the members, we're not just looking on the 80 recommendations that the Royal College had, but we're looking at everything as a whole. And if I go to the second part of the report, we're looking at progress here as far as the whole organisation is concerned, and we know that this is crucial for the work that we do. It gives us the strong foundations for the work to move forward and progress. These were discussed in the meeting of 2024. These were the institutional changes that are a basis to sustainable improvements. I won't go through them all, but there are 4 that are very important at all times. First of all, developing the strategy. This is something that we need to look at. Not mental health, but well-being also. We know that these go hand in hand. The QMS, Angela's been leading on this work, and this is going through the health board, but the focus on quality has increased within mental health departments and across the health board. The work is being done with the Cwm Taf Morgannwg Health Board, and we're learning from each other. The board have established the project board, and now we're in the process of procurement and evaluating. And I think that's great progress. I must say that the teams are delighted knowing that an electronic system will be in place. I'm out when I can be, and when I'm out there, everybody talks about the difference we're making. Final point in the report is the engagement work. And here, I'm very grateful for all of the public, the patients who've used the services, and to Llais, etc., for being part of the journey. We've matured in this area, and I'm grateful to Leon Marsh, who's often here, who's been a great assistant and been a part of the group. Looking forward to more work in the ABBA College that will bring more development. And finally, there's a summary. We've been reporting on the USC progress, but a summary of the progress in relation to the 80 recommendations, and we certainly have an evidence of 56 of these and still updating, and there is some scrutiny before we share this information. And I'm grateful to Phil, who's in the audience today, for his work bringing this together. This is not easy. and it happens across the board. And you'll see in the you'll see that the confidence level is high. It shows orange in the report. It's not quite in the same place, but I'm certain that we can move the orange item or the amber item with the foundations for the future. I see the way forward in relation to that item, but it's taken longer than we'd anticipated. So finally, the next steps, I hope these are clear. There is still work to be done, so I'm still grateful to everyone who's a part of the group. This has been a great experience. I think we are learning and maturing. Ros will bring a report together to before she ends her contract. That's part of the contract that we have. I'll miss her. She's been a great help. She's challenged us at times. And as the health board, we've been considering now how to use the energy from the team and the work that has happened in the advisory group and moving it to business as usual. And Carol, as the chief exec, and I have been talking about getting a supervision and development group together, making sure that everything is in place is important, and that's part of our improvement journey. I'll finish there for now, Chair, but I'll take questions. I can only thank everyone, board members, members of staff and the team who've been a part of this, but more than anything, our partners and our service users. I really do think we're moving forward, but there is more to be done. Thank you. Thank you for that comprehensive report.
I'm turning to Jeff. I know you've been.
I'll go to Jeff.
Really very involved with this work as part of that expert advisory group representing Llais. I'm just wondering if you've got anything to add to the report and anything you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, I think that my team and Bill, Mr. Nuggets, we work well together to support service users. But that, of course, is our duty, our responsibility.
Yes, yeah.
People really thanks for the lay people that were on the EOG, who, for many of them, this is 12, 13 years that they've been involved with, and they are still giving of their time and their emotions.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's been very different.
Yeah.
But they do that selflessly, with the view that they want to improve services for other people.
Yeah.
So I think that's really worth noting.
Yeah.
And when the EAG finishes, we've discussed how that might go on.
Yes.
There are in fact some really good patient involvement mechanisms within the different units, and it would be good to see those taking on a more strategic role and looking at things just beyond the immediate. They tend to deal with the immediate environment and issues, day-to-day issues. It would be good to see them taking a more strategic role and to be listened to more about their thoughts about how treatment should be, how patients and families should be supported. So I think that it's very good to hear that Carol is going to take personal interest in this and monitor it going forward. The mistake of last time, I think, was that it was left drift, and it needs constant management and leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very much, Jeff. Yeah, diolch fawr iawn. Ac mae'n braf gweld David yma hefyd sydd yn rhan o'r gwaith.
It's good to see David here as well, who's a part and makes an important contribution.
Sylwadau neu gwestiynau?
Questions or comments?
Caroline.
Caroline, first of all.
A pwyllgor, wel, cadeirydd pwyllgor TWC, felly Caroline dros at y ti.
I'd also like to reaffirm the comments by Teresa and Jeff, thanking everyone for their clear timetable to complete everything by Christmas, by the end of December. This is important, and as Teresa has said and Ross says in the report, it's important that we not only act, but that the impact of that action is clear, and that the actions are sustainable long term. I welcome the fact that the internal group is now being prepared. It's an important group to make sure that everything is completed. And not only where mental health department, but the corporate where that is essential to support everything. We need to continue with the transparency of the last year. There is a report, the report does refer to that, and it's important that it continues to report to the QSE and the board. Thank you very much for the hard work and the work that you will carry on doing in the next 6 months.
Caroline, Gareth?
Caroline and Gareth?
I will just endorse. I think it is important to say, you know, about the work that's been done by Ros, and I know she would have really loved to be here today, but you know, she's got very important family engagements. I think 70th birthdays only come around once, don't they? So not hers, her sister's. But also, Jeff, and as has been said, you know, the members of the EAG, I think 2 points I wanted to make, and then 2 questions. The 2 points were just to say, I think, as I understand it, the work of the AG has been really important, and it's an object lesson in both the challenges and the real benefits of proper engagement. And I don't underestimate what a demand that is on people who voluntarily, you know, put themselves forward for that. But we really, as you said, Jeff, really do have to build on that now and try and help inform the strategy. So there's a lot of stuff to be taken forward there. The second thing is I really endorse that bit on page 7, page 8 you were talking about, that the importance of increasing the input in inpatient settings from psychology and AHPs. You know, we talk a lot about the multidisciplinary team, and with absolutely no disrespect to the people who are working in our inpatient units, you know, in difficult circumstances and hard, but that MDT is all too often not really present. So we really do have to work on that. I think that will also need a recognition that some of those inputs can come from different sorts of professional backgrounds. So the role of AHPs, and particularly OTs, you know, in some of that.
Associated health professionals.
Health professionals and occupational therapists. Yes. Yes. Okay. Sorry. So the 2 questions were, so our quality management system, I won't say QMS, our quality management system, as I understand it, is being introduced in a phased fashion. So where are we in terms of the rollout of that in MHLD? I'm not quite clear about that. And so what testing has been done to make sure that the approach, and particularly the maturity assessment tool, you know, works well in that setting as well as in a physical health setting? I'm not for a minute suggesting it won't, just wanted to know that. And the second thing was, you know, there's talk in the report about the culture change leaders, which I know quite rightly, Carol, you're absolutely passionate about. And I'd just be interested in how many of those come from MHLD, because, you know, sometimes it is a bit left to one side, isn't it? So I'd like some assurance that that sort of culture change is also being spearheaded by individuals who've come forward within MHLD.
Teresa?
I'll answer the second one first, if I may. I looked at the leaders and the change of culture, and recently we had a list from members of the WAF group. We have 8, as I understand, of the 85 or 87. And we're hoping to reach 150. We would love more members. I know there is a keenness, but capacity is always something that we need to look at. Change of culture, I think, is essential for all parts of the health board. We have 8. But as far as the QMS, I don't have a date, but that's a journey as well. working on the process, QMS process. We're working already, and there have been conversations with mental health. I don't have a date, but for me, this will be a part of the group that we were working. The quality and the planning for quality on commissioning. I'm quite confident that everything's in place, but as far as your question of whether or not it will be a fit, I don't have concerns there at all. It's part of my portfolio, and I have the health principles there, and they use QMS naturally as part of their work. And when I look at their work, I must say I don't see any concerns at all about using the same system that mental health doing, and learning disabilities. I don't anticipate any problems at all.
Claire, a wedyn dwi'n
Claire.
troi at Carol, wedyn nawn ni orffen yr eitem yma.
Carol.
Claire.
Diolch, and it's really good to get the report and to get the update, and I think it's really pleasing to see the ongoing engagement of service users and real people in this work. And I know last time we had an update, we talked about what we can learn from this for all of our engagement activity and how we involve people more closely in, you know, when we talk about planned care, how are we going to now talk with the people going through some of those processes to build their views and input into how we can make those services better for the future. So that's really helpful. Really useful to get Caroline as chair of QSE's update. And so I guess my question perhaps relates to that really, which is good to see the progress. But we're saying that of the 56 of the 80 actions that have progressed to the point that evidence has been reviewed, 22 of them. So it's good that we've got a good audit trail and a good kind of focus around assurance, but 22 of them need more evidence to be provided for them to be kind of fully signed off. So it's a question really about whether we are, what I guess it's to Teresa, what our confidence levels are that we will complete all of those actions by December this year, because that's only 4 months away. And I guess my assurance as a board member is that I know that the QSE committee will be the ones who are validating our progress in that space, but that still feels like there's a lot to do in a short space of time.